Good morning, everybody. My name is Alice Pedretti. I work for CSR Europe, which is a business network for sustainability, and I will be the moderator of the session, so actually I will be the one that should speak the least. I still want to introduce a little bit the session. The session is about transforming supplier trainings and capability building. I think more than transforming is also about how they are evolving over time, and that is why in this session I would like to try to make it practical and to try through the presentations that we will hear to understand what are the features of good capability building tools. We already know, I think this is a little bit one of the messages that I picked up in this day and a half, that is about ecosystem. So it's about collaboration, it's not about competition. And that is, I think, why we don't only have companies here, but we have a good representation of what this ecosystem is. I will ask my panelists to introduce themselves, to introduce their company or organization, and to answer a first question that is the same for everybody. And we will then ask you some poll questions, so please keep your phone close to you. And then we will have a second question to try to summarize also what are the main features that we have identified together, and then of course we will have Sedex also that will give us some final insights. With no further ado, I would like Monica to start, and the question that I will ask all my panelists are, what innovative solutions you have in place and can be put in place to accelerate capacity building both for retail and supplier brands? Monica.
Hello. I'm Monica Mitteness, and I am Manager of Corporate and Supply Chain Quality for ITI Tropicals. We are an importer of tropical fruit juices and purees in the U.S. In this role, I am a liaison for our processors, which are around the globe, and in this liaison role, it is my responsibility to work with our processors to inform them of our customer requirements as well as the requirements for the U.S. We do some work with customers in Europe and Asia, but mainly customers in the United States. Now, as you can imagine, our processors are little processors, medium-sized processors, and very large processors. So the factories themselves are at different points in their development of their social responsibility programs. And it is my role to kind of get them kind of all together to meet various customer needs. We also know that our customers are at various points in their CSR platforms and their development as well. And that can be very challenging because we work with extremely large customers that have very well-defined platforms and very well-defined requirements, which for the most part are very easy to follow because they are very well-defined. And we also have very small customers who do not even understand what a CSR platform looks like. So I have to educate customers as well. So some of the tools and things that we have started is the first thing that ITI Tropicals did was develop its own CSR platform and pillars and those kinds of things. And then I brought that to the processors and was absolutely amazed at how much that aligned with their corporate social programs. Whether they had it written down or whether they had it in their minds, it aligned very well, which was great. So that was the first tool, is you have to have some sort of an idea to begin with. The second thing is that our larger processors, for the most part, were asking for a social audit, and we had decided at that point that we were going to ask our processors to go for the absolute most robust, most inclusive audit there was, and that was the SMETA audit at the time, and I still believe that is the case. So that was the audit that we encouraged our processors to achieve. We are now at 90% social audit compliance with our processors or our factories. So that tool is another tool to use. But this conference is going beyond compliance. So when we were talking CSR and we were talking about corporate social, I also had customers who didn't understand social audits. They didn't know what to ask for. They had no idea. So what I started to do was to tell my factories stories, what they were doing in their communities, what they were doing for their workers. I have a factory that provides housing for their workers. They have a clinic. They have built a community. They have built schools for the children that are in that community. They have built mosques and temples and churches. They have created marketplaces. They have taught their employees the ability to save and have built a bank. I have another processor that has a foundation that they have created. So what I did is I created stories in the form of presentations to customers who maybe hadn't really thought about corporate social programs. So the tool that we created beyond the audit was a story. And as a supplier or a processor or a factory, don't be afraid to tell your story. When I visited these factories and I would mention a social audit, the look of fear in their eyes, I would hear, Miss Monica, we don't want to do another audit. We won't comply. We're worried about labor. We're worried about the labor standards. And I said, okay, tell me what you do. Let's talk about what you do. What do you do for your employees? What do you do for your communities? And after an hour of discussing it, I would leave with pages of things that they were doing that I could tell their story. And they felt so much better about themselves. And I said, see what you can do? Let's tell your story. And the other thing that I would encourage you to do if you're a supplier is to build a relationship with your customer. Invite them to your factory. Have them come see what you do. Have them come see you. That's another tool that I think you forget. It's all about the relationship. So if you tell your story, yes, you have an audit, and I encourage as the very first step for all of my factories to have audits because you have to do it. It is a check and balance, and it is what you have to do. But don't forget that you have a story and talk about all the great things you do. Maybe you donate juice to the local community. Maybe you teach the children in the schools about health and nutrition. There's a lot of good things that you do that go beyond all of those things. So as you're thinking about these things, be sure to tell your story to your customer. I guarantee you they will use it. As a final ending, one of our customers that uses one of our products in a non-dairy creamer, because we told them the story from one of our processors, they use that story in a commercial that runs in the United States, and at the bottom of the tagline, made with coconuts from Sumatra, and it's all because we told the story. So just be sure you do that, and I think that those kinds of tools will help you go beyond compliance and beyond the audit.
Thanks, Monica. And I think it's very important, and I want to summarize at the end some of the features that I picked up from your presentation, but indeed these stories and the relationship building, I think it's indeed very important with the customer. So maybe it's time to hear from a retailer.
Yeah.
And what is the perspective of this second actor in the ecosystem?
Well, good morning, everybody, or afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm loving it in London. I can turn on the taps and fresh water comes out. I can eat ham and cold polonies and things like that and not get listeria. We are really battling in Cape Town with lots of problems, but we have got a lot of hope. We've got a new president and things are looking up. But I wanted to tell you the story of Woolworths. We're not connected to any other Woolworths that you know of. It just happens to be a coincidence with the name going back deep in history. But 2002, one of our farmers, well, let me just tell you how big we are today. Sorry, we We trade in 14 African countries. We have about 45,000 employees. We sell fresh food, that's the dominant business, but we have clothing, beauty, homeware, and a financial services business. So we're a big South African corporate. But in 2002, one of our farmers took 38 women from his farm. They were working on a tomato farm, sort of picking the tomatoes, and they had to cut back the vines. And the farmer took what he called monkeys and threw them off his farm because they weren't trimming the vines correctly. Put them on the side of the street in the middle of nowhere. And I mean the middle of nowhere. You would drive for ages before you would come past these people. Well, the newspapers got hold of this story, and it wasn't Farmer X, it was Woolworths that took the thing. That's when we got a huge jolt. We were, what's going on here? This is not our values. We're a values-led business. We try to be responsible, and we got punished by the media very heavily. So we started auditing our suppliers. We did the first ethical audits within a year, and we started saying, these are things you have to abide by. Today we've moved to Sedex, and so a lot of our suppliers are doing Sedex audits or SMETAs. But I want to talk to you about a project which I think is innovative. We call it Farming for the Future. We have a big fresh food business, and a lot of farmers supply us with fresh food. In the market share in South Africa, we have about 10% of the formal market, but in fresh produce, we have about 30%. So if you want your fresh fruit and vegetables, you come to Woolworths. So we thought, well, we know the challenges. We had a lot of universities giving us help, saying, look, the future is going to be, South Africa is going to be a drier country. They were dead right. The soils that we have in South Africa are not as wonderful as your soils in Europe, and our soils are poor nutritionally. It's a lot of sand. I mean, South Africa is sort of like 85% sand, and the water. And yeah, so the farmers, we wanted to maintain a supply of fruit and vegetables into the future and control it and help it as much as possible. But each farmer has their own expertise. And what we did is we said, how do we help these farmers improve what they're doing and build their capability? And it was a fascinating experience. We first asked the academics, we asked the farmers, we got everybody together. Everybody came with big ideas. You do it this way. You take all your apple farmers and you see what they're each doing, and then you create benchmarks and you compare one farmer to the other. And we tried that. I mean, I remember one farmer, he was using 4.5 tons of water. I use tons rather than kilograms, or 4.5 tons of water to produce a ton of apples. But a farmer next door, which happened to be just on the other side of the mountain, was using 9 tons of water to produce 1 ton of apples. So we said, we can't use metrics to benchmark and that. And then one guy came to us and said, you know what you should do? You should just start with one farmer, take some benchmarks of his farm, and compare him in a year's time. And that began what we found now is a hugely successful program with delivering fantastic results. So what we do is we pay for 5 scientists to visit each farm. They they first do a baseline assessment. They do 2 baselines over 6 months. And they look at all the key areas. Now we're talking about things like irrigation water. We're talking about what toxic chemicals or what chemicals and fertilizers and various things, fungicides and all those names. What are they putting on the plants? We look at the microbes and the minerals in the soils on these particular farms. We almost measured 25 different things in the soil. And we did the baseline, and we build a baseline, and then we tell the farmer on our little scorecard, which is made up of 8 sub-scorecards, but we say, Mr. Farmer, you're an apple farmer, you scored 60% on our scorecard, which means that you are 60% sustainable and 40% not sustainable. And we don't tell anybody else that figure. We just say, you're 60. We'd like to get you to 65 within 12 months. And here are the suggestions from the scientists. And they're normally 3 suggestions maximum. And we help them to focus on the 3 most important areas which we know will give them the biggest bang for the buck. And it works really successfully. And we've integrated that with our buyers. Now, we integrate it very gently with the buyers because they can go mad if they see somebody that's got an 85% score and somebody's got a 65. But we tell them, we train them, the buyers, to understand that this is important. It's not, the price is more important today, they will tell you that. But over time, it's about progress. Who's making the most progress? And the buyers love scorecards. They have several scorecards. So now we have added on to their scorecard a sustainability scorecard, which is the social and the environmental scores get put together. And when they've done their sort of like the innovation, the quality, the pricing, the availability, and all the things that are important to buyers, and that, they do it in a gold, silver, bronze context. So you gold, silver, or bronze in each one of those areas. And in sustainability, you are gold, silver, or bronze. Now, the lowest of those, all of those scorecards, is actually your score as a supplier. So if your innovation is fabulous, your availability is fabulous, but your sustainability is bronze, your score as a supplier for the year is bronze. And we don't grow bronze suppliers, and they all know that. We like to grow silver suppliers. Same language as M&S is using simple color coding system to push our suppliers along. And it works very well. It's simple. All the detail, the huge detail of what all those chemicals are in the soil, what all those fertilizers and how toxic they are, is all simplified down to a number. And we drive the numbers because that's what retailers are good at. Yeah, so that's farming for the future, and the feedback we get from farmers is just awesome. Their chemical use has gone down, the yield per hectare has gone up, their quality, because if you think about food, and where does the supply chain begin with food? It doesn't begin on the farm, it actually begins in the soil. And if you can get the right microbes and grow the right crops in the right areas, nature does the rest for you. So we're teaching our farmers to work with nature, and not to be monoculture, what do you call it, conventional farming with high chemical inputs. We are actually pulling them from that sort of old way of doing things to a more working with nature. They're making their own compost. They're breeding their own predators in the form of ladybirds. They are doing the most amazing things to score points and to tell us their stories, which we then tell to our customers. And it's, yeah, we're very proud of it, and it works for us. We tell the customers, we have labels on our product which say this product is made with less water, less chemicals, little harm to the environment or something like that, and no extra price to you. So, thank you.
Thanks. And here stories come back again. And also how you can build resilient, let's say, productions by building upon the expertise of the different actors in your supply chain, in this case the farmers, and then matched with scientists that can help them identify solutions probably even more quickly or easily. Yes. And I think the link to the skills is probably also how we can then connect to the third speaker that we have here. We were speaking at the beginning about ecosystems indeed, so it's not only about suppliers, retailers, or brands in general, but it's also about the other actors. Tom, you mentioned also the media, and I think it's also an important actor to rely on sometimes. So ILO, International Labour Organization, I think everybody knows it very well, but it would be interesting to understand how to move beyond audits, focusing also on the skills aspects that we also heard before. So Juliet.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, I'm here as part of an ILO IFC joint project called Better Work, and we are one UN project which is focusing on trying to improve competitiveness and working conditions in global garment and footwear industries. So we currently have projects in 7 different countries and are looking at 3 or 4 new possible countries. The project is, as the ILO is, it's a marriage of business, government, and worker representatives. So at every level of the program, we have governments, worker representatives, and the industry represented, which is not always a recipe for fast movement, but we feel we have the key players in the room, if you like. So that operates, we work at a global level involved in gathering research and trying to shape global debates on the future of the industry. And at national level, we work trying very often to make links with and bridges with the governments to try and tackle the issues that I think somebody said yesterday. There are many issues that you as businesses can't tackle on your own. They relate to national law or lack of enforcement, lack of, in some cases you have things where the law requires a government permit, but the local government officers don't issue the permits. How do we get around that? Every factory is non-compliant. So we're trying to, again, take these issues up with the government. But maybe what I'll talk a bit about here is what we do at the factory level, because I think that relates very much to the question. So innovative solutions to accelerate capability building. And I have to say, our program model at the factory level has changed over the years. We've learnt along the way. The first program was in 2001 in Cambodia, and we've made many changes to the model as we've found certain things don't work. The first thing we found that was a big barrier to capability building and accelerating that was starting our relationship with factories with an audit. So when we went in at the beginning and we basically nailed them and told them everything they were doing wrong and then said, hey, and now we'd really love to work with you in partnership and build your capacity, they were already fed up with us before we'd even started. So actually the first thing we did, well, not the first thing we did, the first major change was we flipped the model. So we actually start off now our relationship with 3 months to build capacity and build a relationship at the factory level. And that's been really a key change for us because it's meant we've started off on a positive footing. So by the time we do an audit, which we do, we call it an assessment, not an audit. We don't use it to rate factories. We use it just to benchmark where we are. So as Better Work and the ILO, we don't rate factories. We just say, let's get the information about where we are. And what we really want to do is look at progress. So that was one of the first things we did. What we do is we work with factories on an ongoing basis, year on year, on a rolling cycle, and we work almost exclusively through a joint management worker committee. So again, it's something that came up a lot yesterday, I think, which is making sure that workers are part of the solution. And, you know, there were many examples yesterday of what workers can contribute, and I think we've seen that more and more, how management can actually benefit from the knowledge that the workers have. But it's not easy, right? This dialogue has not been traditionally something that either the workers' side or the management have been used to doing. So a lot of the work we do has been to build the capacity of both sides to engage in these conversations. And the other thing we've found is that capability building before, there seemed to be a lot of focus, if you like, when it was called more training on technical inputs. And there were a lot of short-term technical inputs in factories and things either would or wouldn't improve for a short period of time. And then a year or two later, you were back to square one. So one of the things we're also trying to do now is to shift the focus. We still offer training in capacity building on various technical issues that are relevant to the industry. But what we've realized is that to actually enable a factory to be in control of its own progress, you need to build the capacity on different skills. They needed to learn skills like negotiation skills. If you want management and workers to work together, they need to understand both sides, how to negotiate effectively, basic things, how to run a meeting together, how to assess risk, how to assess the root causes of problems. So we have put in a lot of effort to trying to work on those kind of areas. Workplace communication has been a critical one. We've had many examples where actually workers strike in a factory over an issue that actually doesn't exist, but the workers didn't realize it had been resolved because it wasn't communicated to them. So it's looking at all the different steps along the way and where things can go wrong. Just a few other specific examples of, I think, what we've found has helped to accelerate progress is in the garment industry, particularly taking a training of trainers approach has helped because the turnover in that industry is huge, and I think that's one of the challenges many people face. They say, you know, we go in and train people and then they leave. In the garment industry, actually, they very often leave to another garment factory, so if you look at it as improving the industry as a whole, I think your contribution is still valid, but it is, I think, frustrating for people. So we're very much always try to offer alongside whatever training we have, a training of trainers on that issue. The other thing we found really powerful in terms of accelerating capability building, and again, someone mentioned it yesterday, but is peer-to-peer learning. So one of the things we offer within our program is every quarter we offer what we call an industry seminar in a local, they're in different local areas where the industry is based. And these seminars, they're normally half a day, and it basically has very often a small technical input from outside on an issue pertinent to the industry. At some time it may be on chemical safety, if that's the relevant thing, or it may be on the new label or whatever it is. But that's only a small portion of the session. The majority of the session is about enabling factories to share with one another both best practice and challenges. And we've found that this peer-to-peer learning is probably the most powerful tool in the box, and not always easy to bring them together, but we've found that's worked well. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks a lot. And I was trying to pick up because I think you touched upon many of the elements that I heard also from the previous presentation. And before actually passing to the two questions that we have for you, so maybe you can start preparing your phones, I wanted to summarize a little bit what I picked up from your presentation, and based on this and what we will also learn from these poll questions, I will ask a second question to all my panelists. What I picked up here is that when we talk about transforming or this evolution of supplier training and capability building, it's still, and it has to be based on data, social audits, scorecards, but you need some data to base it on. It's about practice exchange that could be in the form of stories, a peer-to-peer exchange, but also awareness raising session, Juliet, you were also mentioning. And I think what is important here is that why the practice exchange is important, because it allows also replication. So let's not reinvent the wheel, but also let's build upon what is already existing out there and partner for enlarge the scope. It's about building relationship. So I don't remember, I think if it was Juliet or Thompson, build relationship to build capabilities. I think it's very important. With customers, with your trainers, so in 3 months' time, or etc. It's also about collaboration for improvement. I think that is very important. It is about this relationship building aspect. And it's about ownership of this transformation and this change. I think this is, for me at least, is maybe the most challenging aspect in the implementation, but it's important indeed to build upon the expertise of the actor in the value chain and the supply chain, and to give the factor the control of their own progress. I think that is very important to make them understand that, but also to then act upon it. And last but not least, communication. Communication meaning simple and easy language, meaning explain the role or train the trainer, so explain. And I also included in this last part the role of media, but also NGOs and watchdog, to actually make not only the public opinion aware, but sometimes also the companies. I've been working with some companies that said, actually we learned about this because we had a big scandal and we were in all the news. But and I think more and more this is happening, this can be, in the long term, of course, a good aspect that you can use to actually build a story as well of progress. Now I would like to see on the screen this first question. Actually, it's two related questions. We are speaking about going beyond audits, and you will understand why this question after you also see the next one. But how many audits did you have last year? You have to turn. And if you can maybe use your phones to answer. Well, then it's much better than what my prevision was, so I'm very happy to see that it's less than 50. And now maybe the second poll. I think it's also very interesting to comment on it. Still very much related to the first one. Has the number of audits went down as the emphasis shifted towards capacity building? That's, I think, a very interesting result, completely the opposite of what I expected. But I think it's important actually to see this because it's always the case that, especially when we go to these big events or we speak to, or we hear more the practices of the companies that are more advanced in this journey. And I think it's the case also in this panel. Maybe I would like to have 2 minutes each of the panelists to based also on this. So how companies can help suppliers to transform. So how companies and organizations can really help trying to actually go down with this number of audits and build these more resilient supply chains. Maybe Tom, you can start.
So I think it's very important to train the buyers. They've got to understand that they're not just buying apples, they're buying, there's a whole business behind that. So, and they don't really understand it. You know, they come with their CA degrees or something and they just push the numbers, and it's not their responsibility surely to make sure that the farmer workers are paid correctly. I mean, they're just buying apples. So it's to get through to them is important. To integrate scoring and audit results with them is hugely influential. If you can get the information to them and get their bosses to measure them. I do one thing which recently blew away the buyers. Every time we do an audit, we tell the buyers that your company is a green audit, and they're very delighted. But then next to it, I put, this is what the lowest paid worker on that supplier is getting as a paid, an hourly rate. And there's shock and horror at that number, because how could you live on that wage? It's economic slavery. It's not forced, modern slavery, as the English term. It's not forced labor. It's just pure economic slavery. And when they get it, as a human being, you do feel, this is something I need to get involved with, and I need to understand more. So just pile them up with information, give them information, and then feed it back to them after you've got the information, and just make them conscious, because most people would do the right thing without a problem.
Thanks. Monica.
So I want to share some audit numbers, just because I don't have the same numbers that came up here. So I pulled our 3 largest processors. One had 29 audits. Now, this is not internal audits, because they do a lot of internal audits. One had 29, one had 151, and the other had 60. So you can see that 2/3 of my guys were above the 50 mark. So I want to say that the first thing is we're not probably going to get past audits, and we recognize that. And so we all know that, my factories know that, and they know this. But what I'd like to say is there's a group in the United States, and we've kind of embraced this, and they're called AIM Progress. And they have all decided to choose one audit, and it's a mutual recognition program. And they've chose the SMETA 4-pillar audit. And we've kind of run with that as an importer and said, hey, let's stick with this, let's have our factories do this, and then let's try and convince our other customers to also accept this audit. And I was happy to hear that AIM Progress has also developed some sort of another app on worker, I don't know, what is it, labor or some kind of thing with Sedex too. So that group has also gone beyond and done other things. I think that's a good thing. And I think as a customer, if you can work with other customers to do things like this. Now, I know there's confidentiality, and I don't want to share my secrets, and I get that. But if you can find like-minded people in your same business, we as factories appreciate that, and as suppliers appreciate that. The number one thing that I would tell you is get to know your customer or your supplier, especially if they are your primary supplier. Go visit them, build a relationship with them. Then when you ask them to do things, they are much more willing to do things. Work with them, talk to them, explain your positions to them, help them understand. When we first started doing social audits, my largest factory has 6,500 employees. The SMETA audit took 7 days. 7 days. They had to write a handbook for their employees. It took them 4 months to write that. The large customer that requested it wanted it done immediately. We couldn't do it. They knew that. So we told them, but because they knew the processor, they knew ITI, and they worked with us, they understood that. They'd visited the factory, they'd seen the people, and they worked with us on this. And so they understood that. And so get
Monica,
to know
sorry,
your
I have-
supplier.
Thanks. I'm receiving some. Juliet, if you also want to comment.
Yeah, I'm right in front of the timekeeper, so I'm going to be really quick. And actually, I think there are many things you can do, but I'm just going to pick on one. One of the things I think I've seen happening is many companies have started looking less at audit and more beyond compliance and beyond audit and at capability building, but the rating systems used to rate facilities have not kept pace. So I would say, look at your rating system. Most rating systems look simply at compliance, which reinforces the idea that what we're interested in is compliance. If you're interested in capability building and you really believe that's the way forward, which seems to me to be the feeling at this conference, I would say you need to allow time for sustainable change, and capability is about sustainable change. It takes time. It's not quick. It's not fixing the firelight. It's not opening an exit. It's not even paying more, which in itself takes time. But if it's about proper industrial relations and worker management communication, it takes a long time. If it's about really building the capacity of factories to be in control of their own development, that takes a long time. So if you want to look beyond audit, make sure your rating system actually acknowledges companies that are doing something around these changes. So acknowledge their efforts and their commitment to change. Stick with them while they're in this process of change. We see rating systems with you've got 3 weeks, you've got 6 weeks, you've got 6 months, and everything's got to be fixed. This drives two things. It drives either a hide the problem or stick a plaster over it, but you really don't have time to address it properly. Allow them time, stick with them, and finally, it would be great if we could incentivize those businesses that we think are doing the right thing with real business benefits. So put your custom where your company says its interests are.
Thanks. And I think Sedex also have some final remarks. Katrin, sorry, we are a little bit late, on how also these efforts can be put in practice.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Katrin, hello, from Sedex, the training manager. So I wasn't just sitting here in the middle of the panel warming a seat. I think a few keywords that I've got from the panel session were stories, story sharing, collaboration, and Sedex will be able to actually help everyone with sharing best practices. So we have certain tools that were presented throughout this session yesterday in the Sedex Stakeholder Forum on Monday as well. And as Monica actually mentioned, one of these tools is the worker impact assessment tool. So actually being able to collect some data of workers and see how they really feel at the workplace. We can share best practices, for example, through the member directory. So that's a new tool that will be available soon. And of course, Sedex e-learning. So from the training team, something that we also presented on Monday, where there will be sustainability resources available. But I think it's not just about sharing these kind of information and making training available. It's about sharing the stories, which will be helpful for others. So helpful for other farmers around the world, with the Farming for Future, for example. So we can all learn from each other and we can all collaborate. I think that's the main aim. That has always been the main aim from Sedex. And yeah, I don't want to be between, I think it's lunch next. Yeah, I don't want to be between you guys and lunch. But if anyone has any questions about any of these tools that we offer, where you can share your stories, share your best practices, we're down at the Sedex stand where lunch will be as well.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I think actually it's good that it's lunch break, so you can also ask the questions to the different speakers that you didn't have the time to do it in person. I would like to ask you to join me for a big applause to our speakers. Thank you. And have a nice rest of the conference.